Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're doing good and well. So we move on to episode number 6 of the Dark Horse Disc Sunday series that I've been running. And sadly this week it's just me on my own, and that's entirely because of me and my schedule and me being away this weekend. So I'm actually pre-recording this video. I'm not actually recording it on Sunday. So I'm talking about this album, which is pretty special to me this week. It's very much a personal choice, this being the Contortionist Clairvoyant, which came out on the 15th of September of 2017. And this is their fourth album that followed on from what was seen by a lot of fans. I'm going to come on to this a bit later, but as their kind of, I think, their triumph album, which was Language, their third release. And you know, it was interesting kind of watching an interview with the singer Michael Lessard talking about this album and the previous album, Language. This is a bit more of a darker album to Language. It is more of a progressive rock style album in a way, in the style of the record. There's no more death growls or deathcore style to this album. That's pretty much all gone in this record. And therefore it's a little bit different in style. And the interesting thing as well is, you know, Michael in the interview I saw was talking about how this album and its predecessor Language were both sort of tributes or in memory of his friend who very sadly passed away. And that first album was a positive album, that Language album rather, was a positive album because he felt he needed that, I think. Whereas this album, you know, 3 years I think after Language, is a little bit more, it's that darker album. I think it's got sort of a lot more melancholy in this album. This is like a release of emotion, but it's done in a very, you know, really sophisticated, really interesting tracks throughout this album. It's a bit of a, you know, it's when you, I will talk about the tracks a bit later on, but when you get to this end of the album, there's this kind of really big climax. And it feels like a climax of the whole album and not just a climax of that album closer, that one track. It's just such a great payoff for the album as well. And, you know, it's really interesting digging into this and finding out a bit more about it and what this is about. And, you know, that it seems to be, you know, kind of a bit of a tribute to the singer's friend. Now, in the band, we'll go to the lineup now, and I have to admit I don't really know the band particularly well in terms of the band member names for this, but Michael Lessard on vocals, I do know him. Robbie Bakker and Cameron Maynard both on guitars. Jordan Eberhardt is on bass. Eric Gunter on keyboards, and Joey Bakker drums, who maybe I could assume maybe the brother of Robbie Bakker on guitars. I don't know for sure, but same surname there. And you know, so it's a six members of the band, and yeah, just an unbelievably a sort of beautiful album. Yes, it's dark. I don't know if I would describe it, to me, as depressing. Some people might use that word for this album. I think it's kind of very ambient. It has quite a gentle atmosphere to it, though. It's sort of not, you know, not like a doom metal record where everything's, you know, really sort of heavy going and feels like a crawl. This has enough of a beauty and an ambient atmosphere to it to almost feel like it's some great melodies and rhythms as well. So you're sort of pulled along on the journey quite easily, as opposed to it feeling like a drag at any time. So it does feel like a very accomplished record. I think the lyrics are really great and meaningful. It's a really well written album. Song to song is just great. As I say, there is a good flow. So let's go into a bit more about what this series is all about, right? Why do I say this is a Dark Horse album? Because actually, the Contortionists really are a Dark Horse band to me. So the first 5 albums of this series that I've been talking about or have collaborated on the channel for have been really big names. You know, Metallica, Nightwish, Deftones, Alice in Chains, Ozzy Osbourne. These are all really big name artists. And this is a bit of a change. And, you know, I will admit You know, the Contortionists aren't really a very well-known band, but this is still, to me, a pretty special album, and it's still a bit of a dark horse because of its predecessor, Language, which was the album that I think is most revered by the fan base, most talked about by the fan base. And you only need to sort of search out maybe Contortionist reaction videos on YouTube. Most of those videos will be reacting to songs, typically from Language, right, and not from this album. So I think that's a bit of a clue that this may be slightly in the shadow of its predecessor, as is the case with lots of these dark horse disc type of albums. This one to me is a genuine dark horse all round, as I say, because the band aren't quite as well known as lots of the bands I've done so far in the series, but it's also just a really strong dark horse because I think it's pretty fantastic. And you know, maybe if you've heard this album as well, you can relate to some of what I'm saying, you know, the emotional style of the album, as well as it feeling like a real kind of excellent progressive style record, and a really beautifully flowing record, as I say, with great sounds. Sonically, this album sounds really, really, the production is fantastic, I think is what I'm trying to say. So what are my three favourite tracks on Clairvoyant by the Contortionist? Reimagined, which is the third track I like quite a bit. I like the chorus of that song. Return to Earth. The last two tracks are probably my real favourites, which is Return to Earth, gorgeous song, great lyrics, great vocal performance I think on this album from Michael Lessard, and that final song, Monochrome Pensive. As I was saying, that's the climax to this album, and it doesn't waste a second, that song. I think even though it's 9 minutes, every second you are in for that journey, and it is that beautiful build-up of layers of those lead guitar notes, almost like, really well thought out guitar patterns and stuff, and it builds and builds and builds until finally, after I think that last chorus, the song just explodes. It just explodes, and it's such a great climax to the album as a whole. And like, there's a bookend really, because you've got the bookends of the album. The introduction track is like the first part, which is called Monochrome Passive, and the Monochrome Pensive is the final album, the second part, if you like, in the album closer. So a little bit like a lot of prog albums do, with the part one being the sort of first track and part two, or you know, being the last track. So they kind of do that here with this album, right? So I mean, I usually with the other videos I say where this ranks in the catalogue. I mean, actually I love Language, but because of how this album impacted me and how I really felt what was kind of what the album I think was intended for, you know, to really feel the emotion of it. It's a really great release, and I have heard the other two Contortionist albums as well. I still think this is possibly my favourite actually of all four of them, to be honest, but there you go. They let go of the kind of, as I say, the deathcore elements of their sound here entirely. So maybe this won't be for everybody, but for me it is a fantastic album by the Contortionist from just a few years ago. So I think it's the most recent album I've done of the series as well. So until next time, take care everybody. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. If you're following this series or any other series on this channel, or the album reviews, or even maybe the sci-fi episode series I'm running at the moment, do drop a like and subscribe. Otherwise, from me, take care everybody. Until next time, bye for now.